Okay, good morning, everybody. For those of you just getting in, be sure to do the attendance quiz. And I think we're going to start with taking up the questions for ground proximity warning system. So let's do that from the get-go here. And okay, so nothing like GPS as far as the name goes. GPWS stands for Ground Proximity Warning System. Question 1. Question 2, the ground proximity warning system is designed to warn the flight crew when the aircraft is in danger of striking the ground due to excessive descent rate or rising terrain. Okay. Let's make sure everything's good. Yeah. Okay. Question 3, the system is required on all transport category aircraft. So we've now seen a lot of things that are required on transport category aircraft, starting with a flight data recorder, a cockpit voice recorder, TCAS, Mode S transponder, and now ground proximity warning. Question 4, the ground proximity warning system provides both visual and audio warnings and alerts to the flight crew when any one of 7 mode conditions exist. Question 5, the typical inputs into a GPWS system would include radar altitude, RAD-ALT, barometric altitude, rate of climb and descent, instrument landing system glide slope, landing gear, and flap position. Question 6, what mode is being depicted in the illustration below? And kind of a no-brainer there. It has something to do with the glide slope, looking at the picture, because I see the below glide slope enunciator up. So that's mode 5. Mode 5 is excessive deviation below the ILS glide slope. Question 7, what does mode 1 signify? So mode 1 is excessive descent rate. Looking at the picture below, what mode is being depicted, and I see don't sink, pull up. So that's definitely something after takeoff. Mode 3 is officially what it is, altitude loss after takeoff or go around. 9, what does mode 6 signify? Mode 6 has to do with your altitude and bank angle protection. So mode 6 is your minimums, callouts. Question 10, what mode is being depicted in the illustration below? And actually, yeah, so it looks like mode 4A, unsafe terrain clearance, has to do with the landing gear. The profile assumes that you're landing and your gear is not down. That would be followed by a mode 4B if your flaps weren't properly extended. Question 11, the mode 7, wind shear warning, really takes priority over all other ground proximity warning system modes and consists of a red colored wind shear light and a siren followed by the oral warning wind shear, wind shear, wind shear. Question 12, what mode is being depicted in the illustration below? There's a whole lot of mountain coming at that aircraft, or vice versa. So that's mode 2, excessive descent rate. And you're getting the pull-up, the red pull-up lights, the soft warning terrain, and then the harder warning whoop, whoop, pull-up. Question 13 is enhanced. That's what it stands for. Enhanced ground proximity warning system. As soon as I see the enhanced part, I now see a screen coming into play, whether that's an independent enhanced ground proximity warning screen or the screen from the color weather radar system is being used for it, or one of the EFIS screens. It's going to show us the terrain below in colored gradients, with red being the closest to the aircraft. Question 14, GPWS features allow the system to monitor the aircraft's position relative to the surrounding terrain and provides a much quicker warning times impending ground contact. Yeah, it's nice to have basically a display to show you where the ground is. 15, enhanced ground proximity warning systems have a worldwide terrain database that probably needs to be updated on a regular basis. And last but not least, question 16, the color red is used on the enhanced ground proximity warning system to display the highest elevation terrain below the aircraft. And that is ground proximity warning system. So I'll be sure to put these answers to this review sheet in the module for ground proximity warning system. Okay, so let's minimize that for a second. And now I kind of felt bad for the folks last week. There was some technical issues with playing this video on Autopilot between the two rooms. I'm going to give it a go here again. See if it's any better doing it this way. I'm gonna actually pause it a few times during the course of the video and pop up probably. Let me just put it up here. Some of these pictures here from the PowerPoint slide as we go. Just minimize that for a second, see if that's going to work. Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so let's give it a go. Just crank the volume here. So how's the volume at your end, guys?
It's good.
It's good? Okay, that's good. Good news. Okay.
A sophisticated all-mission helicopter like Sikorsky's S-76 Mark II deserves the best avionics package the industry can offer. That's why Sperry has chosen to provide the S-76 with its all-new microprocessor-based dual-digital integrated flight control system. We call it the SPZ-7000, and it's the first digital 4-axis flight control.
I wanted to point that out. Again, we're so used to 3-axis pitch, roll, yaw. When it comes to this particular auto flight system, we have a 4th axis. So let's see what they say the 4th axis is.
System developed for commercial helicopters. But that's not all. Sperry's pilot-acclaimed electronic flight instrument system will be on board the S-76 as well.
So, just sort of a recap, as far as EFIS goes, the top unit in EFIS is your glorified electronic attitude direction indicator, so an EADI. Put it in layman's terms, it's an artificial horizon, okay? But it's got a lot more goodies superimposed onto the screen, okay? But really, anytime I see one of those, it's a vertical gyro. Okay? It even refers to it as a vertical gyro through the course of this movie. Okay, the bottom unit is the electronic horizontal situation indicator. That's a glorified course indicator or navigation indicator with all the bells and whistles, including VOR, localizer, glide slope, compass system. So a nice setup.
Completing the most advanced helicopter avionics package ever offered to the commercial market. Offering a flight control system like no other, Sperry continues its dominance in IFR flight control technology for helicopters with the SPZ-7000. Thanks to digital design, pilots can now have automatic collective control in addition to pitch, roll, and yaw for coupled 4-axis flight.
Okay, so I guess we know what that 4th axis is, automatic collective control. What we're looking at on the screen is the 2 black boxes are your autopilot computer number 1, autopilot computer number 2 is the other black box, and then we have 2 flight directors, number 1 flight director, number 2 flight director, and the autopilot mode controller that's sort of shared between the pilot and the co-pilot.
The benefits: auto deceleration,
Slow me down.
hover augmentation,
Okay, hover me when there's lots of wind, possibly over choppy water when we're trying to rescue somebody from the brink.
radio altitude hold,
Okay, hold me at altitudes anywhere from 0 feet to 2,500 feet above the ground.
and automatic self-test, just to name a few.
Sure. Make sure the system's always working.
Another first in helicopter avionics is the AL300 Air Data Display. This multifunction unit provides for altitude pre-select entry
Okay, let me set altitudes I want to achieve.
and display, momentary display
Okay, let me set rate of climbs and descents so I can get to these altitudes.
of commanded vertical speed, airspeed
Okay, let me set in airspeeds that I want to have the helicopter fly at and hold at.
or radio altitude, dependent on SPZ 7000 mode selection. The AL300 will also display codes for system faults detected during the power-up and pre-flight test sequence.
So the first one that we saw wasn't necessarily a fault. That was a level 2 test going on. This is a fault. So this is a level 2 error code. It's code number 3. And you'd have to go to the flight manual supplement to figure out what code 3 means.
The SPZ 7000 dual digital automatic flight control system is a completely integrated autopilot, flight director, air data, auto trim system, utilizing a full complement of horizontal and vertical flight guidance modes.
So really, to sum it up in a nutshell, this is an AFCS. It's an automatic flight control system. Okay, so it's not just an autopilot. It's a glorified autopilot.
When engaged and coupled to the flight director, the SPZ 7000 will control the aircraft using the same commands displayed on the attitude director indicator.
So I really like this EFIS display. We can see all the goodies that are on this display. So what is this again? Oh, this is the electronic attitude direction indicator. So it's more than just an artificial horizon. I can see it is actually vertical gyro 2, and the reason they're showing vertical gyro 2 is because the number 2 instruments are on the pilot's side in a twin engine helicopter. Pilot sits on the right hand side, so this is the pilot's instruments. So some of the goodies I can see, the paraphernalia around the basic artificial horizon, is I can see over here that localizer mode has been engaged, and I'll look it down at the bottom and I can see the localizer centering needle. And in actuality, it's not quite centered right now. I probably have to fly a hair to the left to center up. I can also see glide slope has been selected. So the glide slope needle is over here on the right, and there's our dot patterns for fly up and down. We're looking pretty good when it comes to the glide slope right now. Okay, a couple other things I couldn't help but notice. Indicated airspeed has been selected. So whatever's going on here, we have an indicated airspeed that might be 100 knots being maintained. This looks like an instrument approach because I see a big amber M here in the right side, and that's the middle marker. And we all know the middle marker is somewhere between, I don't know, 0.5 to 0.8 nautical miles out from the threshold of the runway we're going to land on. It appears that at this moment in time, our radar altimeter system is saying we're about 1,500 feet above the ground, with our decision height set at 150 feet above the ground. So if we don't see what we're supposed to see at 150 feet above the ground as far as in front of us, then we'll probably push the go around button that's on the either on the flight director or on the collective, and initiate a go around procedure and abort the landing procedure. Okay, the other thing I can see on here is collective is the fourth axis of collective is being controlled, and I see the flight director bars. Okay, so you see pink bars. I know it's hard to see the vertical one, but it's in there. So those are your flight director bars. So the autopilot's goal is to kind of keep everything level, keep the localizer centered, the glide slope centered, and the flight director bars centered.
When the autopilot is not engaged or decoupled, the same modes of operation are available for the flight director only.
So what that's saying is the pilot could decouple the flight director, and the command cues, those pink command bars, are still available to the pilot. So the pilot can take over and try to do the same thing as the autopilot was doing, keep the command cues centered.
Pilot interface with the Sperry system is through the PC700 Autopilot controller and the MS700 Flight Director mode selector. These units provide complete mode selection, engage functions, and coupling control for the SPZ-7000. The PC700 Autopilot controller provides for autopilot engagement, autopilot mode selection, and flight director selection and coupling. The Autopilot 1 and 2 push buttons are used to engage each system independent of the other.
When I punch those buttons, they don't light up green. What's the problem? Probably not a broken autopilot. What did I say had to happen in the first 2 minutes?
You had to be off the ground.
No, for this to turn the autopilot on, there's an interlock to something. What's the key component in the autopilot system as far as an input or input devices? They spin. Where are they?
The gyros have to warm up.
Yeah, so that if the gyros aren't up to speed, you're never going to be able to turn on the autopilot. Gyros have to be fully up and spooled up and running for these autopilots to engage. So we want to engage both autopilot computer number 1 and autopilot computer number 2. He's going to go on to say, strangely enough, when you punch those buttons and they light up green, the system actually defaults to the attitude retention mode, which is a hands-off mode. One would think that when you turn an autopilot on, it would default to the SAS mode of operation, which is hands-on, but it doesn't. Looking on the right-hand side, Flight Director 2. The only reason they're showing Flight Director 2 right now is the number 2 instruments are the pilot's instruments. But Flight Director 2 isn't coupled in, so there's no activity from Flight Director 2. It's just been selected should we choose to couple it into the game.
At engagement, the system will always come on in the attitude retention mode. Pressing the Autopilot 1 and 2 push buttons again will turn off each respective system. Pressing the hover push button engages the hover augmentation mode. This cancels couple and SAS attitude mode.
That's quite nice. So when you hit the hover, so if you are search and rescue, let's say, and you're trying to help somebody out, maybe in the water or choppy waters or whatever, and there's lots of wind, you can hit hover hold, and it'll hold the aircraft in place while you're doing that. Notice it canceled out the other 2 modes, whether you're in hands-on flying of SAS or attitude retention mode, hands-off, it cancels those modes.
The hover mode utilizes short-term inertial velocity in the pitch and roll axis to aid the pilot in hovering the helicopter. The pilot may still maneuver the aircraft normally with the cyclic stick, or can change the velocity reference by using the cyclic beep switch.
So we talked about that too. You can, the pilot at any time can grab the cyclic and maneuver the aircraft. But if the pilot just wants to trim, what's available on the cyclic? What was that switch? Oh, the beep trim switch, the 4-way switch, fore, aft, left, right. You can do that, or you can press force trim release and basically free up the system and set a new reference.
The Flight Director Select switch allows pilot selection of which flight director commands the autopilot. Modes can be selected on both computers simultaneously.
I'm looking at that. I see Flight Director 1 on the left side, Flight Director 2 on the right side. There seems to be lots of lights going on both displays. At least 3 lights are on, but neither of those flight directors is coupled in because the abbreviation CPL. There's no on going there, so they're still dormant.
However, the helicopter will only be steered by the computer selected on this switch. When using this switch, the newly selected flight director is always placed in standby. This prevents the helicopter from following old or possibly invalid data.
So I couldn't help but notice on the previous picture, Flight Director 2 was coupled in, and so the aircraft had been flying via Flight Director 2 commands, and the pilot selected Flight Director 1. It decoupled the flight director and put Flight Director 1 in a standby mode, so you don't fly old steering commands.
The SAS attitude switch will always illuminate in the attitude mode when either computer is first engaged. The attitude mode provides hands-off attitude retention, returning the helicopter to the desired attitude after being disturbed.
We said in class that this mode, attitude retention mode, is for en route cruise. So it's basically you get quite tired flying a helicopter for 4 hours. So you definitely be in attitude retention mode, hands-off mode, and in all likelihood, your flight director would be coupled in, and steering would be via the some source of navigation, whether it's GPS, which it probably is in this day and age, or VOR, until you get to where you're going.
Pressing the SAS attitude switch places the computers in the SAS mode of operation. SAS, or Stability Augmentation System mode, is normally used when the pilot desires to hand fly the helicopter. The test button enables the pre-flight ground test of both computers. During the test, all of the MS-700 mode buttons will illuminate and/or flash. The pilot should depress any flashing mode button so that the test can continue. Should a system fault be detected, an error code will be displayed on the AL300 air data display.
Okay, so that's not necessarily an error code. That's a level 2 test. It's test number 3. I saw it transition from 2 to 3. An error code has the abbreviation ER in it.
When the pilot elects to fly 2 vertical modes simultaneously, the flight director portion of the collective command push button will illuminate. This indicates that the collective axis is responding to flight director commands. At radio altitudes below 2,000 feet AGL.
So the reason they're saying below 2,000 feet AGL above ground level is because that's your rad-alt system. Starts working at about 2,500 feet above the ground. So we can engage this collective flight director, or this FD mode.
The pilot may press this button to illuminate RAD. This indicates that the collective axis is maintaining a radio altitude. In the RAD mode, the AL300 will display the reference radio altitude. The couple push button illuminates automatically whenever a flight director mode is selected on the applicable computer, and the autopilots are in the attitude retention mode.
So in order to couple in your flight director, you have to be in hands-off mode, attitude retention mode. You can't be in SAS mode, okay?
Coupling of the flight director is inhibited if only one autopilot is engaged.
So that's the other thing, because this is IFR, instrument flight, you're not going to be able to engage this flight director unless both of your autopilot computers are online.
At times, the pilot may decide to decouple flight director commands from the autopilot and manually steer the helicopter following the command cues on the EADI. This is accomplished by pressing the couple push button.
And I said they do that once in a while just to get some practice to see if they disengage the flight director, and they utilize the command cues, those pink command cues on the attitude direction indicator, and try flying the aircraft themselves, see if they keep the command cues centered up.
The MS-700 provides all mode selection for the flight director. The split light push buttons illuminate amber for armed conditions and green for captured.
Notice only some modes have armed conditions and capture. Other modes just are on, that's it.
When more than one lateral mode is selected, the flight director will automatically arm and capture the sub-mode. The SPZ-7000's servoed collective axis allows 2 vertical modes to be flown simultaneously as long as one of them is indicated airspeed.
What are the 2 vertical modes this guy's talking about? Well, altitude, okay, select is a vertical mode, and indicated airspeed is a vertical mode. The lateral modes he was talking about earlier was heading mode is a lateral mode, and navigation, whether it's VOR or GPS, is a lateral mode.
Lateral flight director modes are heading select, navigation or RNAV, VOR approach or RNAV approach, back course.
Yeah, there's only one part of the back course that's a lateral movement, and that's only if it's available. That's your localizer. Localizer is lateral movement.
And localizer approach. Vertical flight director modes are altitude hold, indicated airspeed, vertical speed, altitude pre-select, ILS,
So ILS glide slope.
and deceleration. The SPZ
There's an error code, so it's a level 2 test, error code 3.
7000's automatic built-in test capability is another feature made possible through the use of digital technology. The test and monitoring performed within the system is divided into three major areas: power-up test, pre-flight test, and continuous monitoring. The power-up test is performed automatically each time power is applied to the computers.
So I'm pretty sure this guy's on the ground just looking at the electronic attitude direction indicators. The radalt showing 0 altitude, and there's not much going on that display.
Failure to pass this test will cause the flight director flag on the EADI to remain in view and illuminate either the AP1 or AP2 fail light on the master caution panel.
So that's bad news when you have a flight director failed on you.
This is a computer failure, and engagement of the failed autopilot is inhibited. Failure codes will be displayed on the AL300, and a complete listing of these codes can be found in the Rotorcraft Flight Manual Supplement.
I'm probably going to assume that error code 14 is a flight director failure.
The second area tested is the pre-flight test.
Now notice that this aircraft is actually on the move here, but there's some conditions that have to be met before you can initiate this test. Keep listening here.
Before takeoff, and with both engine levers at fly and torques matched, the pilot initiates this test by pressing the test button on the autopilot controller. The pre-flight test is interlocked so that it cannot be initiated if radio altitude is above 10 feet.
Did that aircraft that was moving look like it was above 10 feet? No.
Airspeed is greater than 60 knots.
Did it look like it was going quicker than 60 knots? No.
Or if the collective is above minimum pitch.
Pretty sure the collective wasn't above minimum pitch.
This test checks system hardware and software, which are considered to be airworthiness critical. The only action required by the pilot is to press any blinking switch button on the autopilot and flight director controllers as the computer sequence through the test cycle. This test is structured such that a failure to pass is displayed on the AL300 as a fault code. If all tests are passed, the AL300 will display end.
That's a really good sign when you go through that test and the display shows end. Everything's fine.
The SPZ 7000 performs continuous checks of certain functions at least once a second while in flight to assure system integrity. Failure to pass a particular test can cause the autopilot to automatically disconnect and illuminate the appropriate autopilot fail light.
Okay, so what were the three types of tests that happened? What was the first one? Well, it was power up test. That was the first one. And then what was the second one? Pre-flight test. And then after that, it's continuous testing. So there's three levels of testing going on.
Now that we have been thoroughly briefed on the features of the SPZ 7000 dual digital automatic flight control system, let's go upstairs and see how easy the system is to fly. For our demo flight, we will pursue coupled operation for automatic flight path steering. Takeoff is normally made with both autopilots engaged.
Okay, so both autopilots engaged. So we're talking about Autopilot 1 and Autopilot 2 engaged. A little bit different mode controller here, but that's fine. Autopilot 1, Autopilot 2 engaged. And it'll come up in the attitude retention mode. So that's fine. Okay, go back.
In the attitude mode. This allows the full smoothness and stability available to be utilized. Set up for the takeoff as follows. AP1 and AP2 engaged in the attitude mode. Set the heading bug on the...
Okay, in case you're not seeing this, the heading bug is being moved. So the pilot's moving the heading bug. The pilot's going to end up positioning that heading bug on West 270. And so the intent, it seems, is once you take off to engage the heading mode and have the aircraft fly, at least for a short period of time, on the magnetic heading of 270, thanks to the heading bug being positioned on it.
EHSI to the takeoff heading.
So now we're going to set, even though we're just taking off from the helipad on the oil rig, we're going to set this to an altitude we desire to achieve, so 3,600 feet above sea level.
Use the set knob on the AL300 to set the assigned altitude of 3,600 feet. Arm the altitude pre-select mode.
Okay, well, how come that's not going green? How come that's amber? It says arm. What's the deal?
Doesn't that mean that you selected an altitude, but you're not at that altitude yet?
That's right. So we selected 3,600 feet above sea level, but we're nowhere near there. So we've armed the system. Once we achieve that altitude, that will switch from armed, so the amber, to a capture condition once we get at 3,600 feet. We still haven't punched this button for heading. Our heading bug is currently on, it's been moved to 270 degrees west, but we haven't engaged it yet.
At liftoff, press force trim release and maneuver to the desired attitude for climb out. After takeoff, with airspeed greater than 60 knots, engage the heading select mode.
Okay, so we just did that. What was the condition? Well, press force trim release, even though you're in the hands-off mode. Grab the cyclic, press force trim release, and take off. After you're above 60 knots, press the heading mode, and it'll now stay on the heading that you set with the heading bug, 270 west.
The helicopter will automatically capture and track the heading selected on the EHSI. Engage the indicated airspeed mode and use the...
Okay, so I want to engage indicated airspeed and put in an airspeed I want to keep the aircraft at while I'm doing this.
The cyclic beep switch to set the desired airspeed on the AL300.
Notice that I'm in climb mode right now. So I'm climbing. So the last thing I saw on the indicated airspeed on the air data display was about 131 knots. What was it? 100. Was it 103 or 130? I can't remember.
Engage the vertical speed mode and use the...
Okay, new game. Okay, I'm in climb mode. I want to set a feet per minute ascent rate besides the airspeed I want the aircraft to be flown at, so I can achieve this altitude of 3,600 feet. So I'm going to set
selective beep switch to set the desired climb rate, which will be displayed on the AL300.
Okay, so it looks like we wanted to climb out at 600 feet per minute to achieve an airspeed, I think it was 103 knots, and to get to an altitude of 3,600 feet above sea level.
The MS-700 and EADI will display that vertical speed, indicated airspeed, and heading select modes are engaged.
Yes, so vertical speed, indicated airspeed, and heading mode are engaged, and altitude we haven't achieved yet. As soon as we achieve that altitude, one of these modes has got to give. I'm pretty sure you can't have, once you achieve an altitude, I'm pretty sure you can't continue to have a vertical speed. Poof, you're there. It's got to go away.
As a helicopter approaches the desired altitude, altitude pre-select will change from arm to capture, and the vertical speed mode is extinguished.
It's gone.
The helicopter will transition from climb to a level attitude.
Okay, so let's see what's going on here on our electronic attitude direction indicator. Heading mode is on, so it's flying. We're flying 270. Indicated airspeed is on, 103 knots. Altitude pre-select is armed. We haven't captured it yet for 3,600 feet. Our vertical speed mode is on because we're still in a climb at a rate of 600 feet per minute. Collective control is on, and our command cues seem to be in the center. This is a good sign. As soon as we capture that altitude pre-select has to change, has to go to capture, and you have to lose vertical speed. It's got to go away. So you'll see what happens is altitude moves over and overwrites the vertical speed on the left side.
And upon reaching the selected altitude,
okay, so it just happened.
Altitude pre-select is extinguished and altitude hold is automatically engaged. The SPZ-7000 is now maintaining the helicopter at our desired airspeed, altitude, and heading. The navigation mode and...
Okay, new game. I guess I'm not content anymore just flying on a heading of 270, having the compass system in the aircraft, the slave compass system fly the aircraft. I'm moving now the course indicator on the attitude direction indicator. Oh, sorry, this is the HSI. So the pilot wants to fly a VOR radio. So the pilot's going to position, and you can see it here, that 311 is going to change to 315, wants to set a course of 315 degrees using VOR number 2, which is nav number 2, and fly a VOR radio. When that happens, you know, you're going to have to give up the heading mode so that VOR can take over navigating the aircraft. It's kind of interesting because, you know, when VOR is guiding the aircraft, the signals are actually coming from the ground up. The aircraft is being steered from signals coming from the ground from the VOR station to steer the aircraft towards that station.
Enables the flight director to capture and track a desired course as selected by the pilot on the EHSI.
Okay, so the pilot, one thing they kind of don't show it here, but the pilot, after you do that, has to select nav, wherever nav is, this one, has to select nav and arm it, because we're not on the 315 course yet. Okay, we're still flying 270, so we have to arm that nav button. Okay, so let's go back.
The navigation source is selected using the aircraft navigation switching function.
So let's just say that that's nav 2, that's the pilot's nav receiver, and it's tuned to North Bay VOR. North Bay VOR is 115.40 megahertz. We hear the Morse code YYV, but we haven't gotten on that course yet. We're still using heading mode, okay, the slave compass system to steer the aircraft.
To display the desired radio on the EHSI. The nav mode is normally used to track to or from a VOR station.
Pretty sure that's going to be tracking too.
However, RNAV, LNAV, or localizer data can also be tracked.
Or GPS in this day and age.
The pilot must set the heading bug to fly the helicopter.
Okay, interesting. The pilot's now moving that heading bug again. As the pilot moves the heading bug, the aircraft is moving with it, okay, in a coordinated fashion. Okay, it's not going to do a hard over when you move the bug. It's moving with the bug in a coordinated fashion. The pilot's not going to set the bug on 315. The pilot's going to set the bug at a position, an intercept angle, anywhere from 30 to 60 degrees, kind of like you ramping onto the highway when you get, you know, when you want to go on the highway. A nice smooth intercept angle to intercept the VOR radio of 315.
Toward the desired course at the desired intercept angle. Preferred intercept angles are between 30 and 60 degrees. Pressing the nav button.
Okay, so what they didn't show us, that's what I don't like about this video, is they didn't show us that he pressed this nav button and armed the system. Okay, the only thing we get to see is what happens on the electronic attitude direction indicator, but that's okay. Okay, they should have shown it though. So heading mode's on, and then he's gonna push the nav button. We'll see it come up.
On the MS-700 will cause the arm light to illuminate and also engage the heading select mode.
Okay, so what that means to me is you're still in heading mode, except you want to fly a VOR radial or a GPS course, and that's nav armed. Okay, but we're still in heading mode officially. It's still the slave compass system flying the aircraft for now.
If not already engaged. The helicopter is now flying the desired intercept angle. As the helicopter nears an on-course condition, the heading and arm lights will extinguish, and the nav capture light will illuminate.
What that means to me, okay, is you got there. Okay, as soon as you got on your course, heading mode had to go bye-bye, because you're no longer, the steering commands are no longer from the slave compass system. And as soon as you got to the 315, the VOR system took over. It went from arm to capture and turned off the heading mode. So now you're being steered from VOR station signals from the ground up. Good.
The helicopter will smoothly roll out and track the radio signal with automatic crosswind correction.
And I mentioned that in class too. The reason he's adding that little tidbit at the end with automatic crosswind correction is because when you keep a VOR needle centered, okay, in this case, the 315 and the needle will be centered, the aircraft is actually being compensated for wind. Okay, so whatever it takes to keep the aircraft on 315, if that takes, you know, moving the nose of the aircraft into the wind, that's what's happening. Okay, a little different than ADF. When you keep an ADF needle centered, you're actually bowing in with the wind. The wind's taking you off course. But in VOR, if the needle is being maintained in the center, you are compensating for wind.
Pressing the ILS button on the MS-700.
Okay, new game. That nav button up until now, we've been using it to track VOR. Okay, so perhaps, we've been flying to North Bay VOR 115.40 megahertz here in the YYB. At some point, air traffic control wants us to prepare for landing using the North Bay ILS. So we're going to have to change the frequency on the nav receiver. We're going to have to abandon 115.4 or use another nav receiver and channel the North Bay ILS. So 110.90 megahertz IYB instead of YYB, which was the VOR. Now these buttons, now the nav button is no longer being used for VOR. It's being used for the first part of the instrument landing system. It's being used for localizer. So it's localizer arm, and the button beside it here is glide slope arm. Okay, so we're arming the system to get ready to approach the North Bay airport. Okay, and capture the instrument landing system. Heading mode is still on because air traffic control told us to come down from the heavens. They told us probably to maintain a specific altitude above sea level and to maintain a specific heading. That's why heading mode is on, in order to capture the instrument landing system.
With the navigation receiver tuned to an ILS frequency, we'll arm both the nav for localizer and ILS for glide slope flight director modes. The heading mode will also engage, if not already being used. The initial localizer capture angle is set using the heading bug, similar to that of the VOR mode. At localizer capture, the green cap light in the nav button will illuminate, and the nav arm and heading lights will extinguish.
What happened there is we captured the localizer, so this could be as far out as 25 nautical miles out. So as soon as we captured the localizer, heading mode went off, so we're no longer being steered by the slave compass system, and now we're being steered by the localizer beams coming from the ground up. Okay.
The helicopter will roll out and smoothly track the localizer signal. The pitch axis may be engaged in any of the pitch modes.
They're saying you can actually, if you want, you can have an altitude. That's probably a good idea because air traffic control probably told you when you came down from the heavens to maintain a specific altitude and a specific heading in order to capture the instrument landing system. First we captured localizer. We're about to capture glide slope. I'm pretty sure though, once we capture glide slope, you can't have an altitude anymore because it's pretty hard to maintain an altitude when you're going down a slide.
Prior to glide slope capture. Upon glide slope capture, the previous pitch mode is canceled if in 2Q operation.
So that was 2Q operation. Now they're going to talk about 3Q.
If in 3Q operation.
So what did we add into the game here? Oh, we added not just an altitude, we added in an airspeed. Can we have an airspeed when we're flying the approach? And the answer is sure. You can have an altitude. You probably are told to maintain an altitude, and you can have an airspeed. Let's say we're going 100 knots. But as soon as we capture glide slope, one of those two things has got to go away for sure, and that's going to be altitude. But we can still have an airspeed, even though we're going down the glide slope.
Upon glide slope capture, the indicated airspeed mode is retained, and the other pitch mode is canceled. Upon glide slope capture, a command is generated to smoothly approach the glide slope beam. Capture can be made from above or below the beam. However, localizer capture must occur first. Another first for the SPZ-7000 is the decel mode of operation. This mode may only be utilized in conjunction with the ILS mode. After arming the ILS mode with the IAS mode engaged, pressing the decel button will illuminate.
Okay, so basically it's saying you've got an indicated airspeed. Maybe you're going 100 knots. I'm pretty sure you're going down a slide, and at some point you want to slow down. You want to decelerate. So we want this decelerate mode active so that at a predetermined point, we're going to knock off the indicated airspeed, let's say from 100 knots, and slow the aircraft down as we're going down the glide path.
The arm light. The arm light will not illuminate if the airspeed reference is below 70 knots.
Okay, they're saying you can't initiate deceleration if you're already only flying 70 knots. You're going slow enough, okay? This deceleration point is 70 knots, so you'd have to be going something higher than 70 knots in order to initiate decelerate mode. Okay, let's say we're going 100 knots.
Or if the radio altimeter is invalid. At some computed point, the arm light will extinguish and the capture light will illuminate.
Okay, so we're slowing down now.
At this time, the collective will be commanded to maintain the helicopter on the glide slope.
Okay, so where are we here? So let's see. Localizer mode's on, we're centered. Glide slope mode is on, we got to fly up a little bit. Collective control is on. Deceleration mode is on. We're at the outer marker. I see a blue O here, and we're at 810 feet above the ground. Okay, things are looking good. So we're at the outer marker. We're somewhere between 4 to 7 nautical miles out from the threshold of the runway.
While the pitch axis will be commanded to decelerate the helicopter from its present airspeed to a reference airspeed of 70 knots at a radio altitude of 200 feet. At the capture point, the reference airspeed of 70 knots will be displayed on the AL 300.
Interesting. So it's gonna slow us down to 70 knots at 200 feet. Why is 200 feet ringing a bell for me? Oh, that's the middle marker, and that's usually in a Category 1, the decision height for missed approach and a go-around procedure.
For 5 seconds.
Let's see what happened. So decelerate mode is on. We just saw the 70 knots. Localizer seems to be not too bad. We got to go a little bit to the right. Glide slope, we got to just go a little bit down a hair. Middle marker light is on. We're about 280 feet above the ground right now. We've set our decision height for 200 feet. If we don't see what we're supposed to see at 200 feet, we'll initiate a go-around procedure. But if we do, we'll just keep going, proceed with the landing. Okay, and we'll see another thing, a little rising runway will come out of here at the decision height. And the helicopters they don't land you on the runway. They do follow the ILS all the way down, but they don't land you. They go into auto flare mode. So the aircraft will flare and it'll hover at 50 feet above the runway, and you can do whatever you want at that point. You're off to the races.
At decision height, the pilot must elect to...
Okay, so we're 210 feet above the ground right now. Our decision height is set to 200. Watch the transition. You'll see a DH light come up and then the rising runway. We're going to continue with the landing.
Execute a go-around or continue the approach to a landing. If the coupled approach is continued, an additional feature called auto level will flare the helicopter to maintain a radio altitude of 50 feet above the runway. Note, if the radio altimeter is not valid, auto level will not occur, and the helicopter will continue to follow the glide slope.
Trust me, the pilot's got his hands wrapped around that cyclic and the collective, because they're really worried that the auto flare isn't going to happen. It's not going to flare the aircraft, and you're just going to continue down the glide path and bellow into the runway. So yeah, it does. You know, as long as RADALT's working, you're fine.
The go-around mode may be engaged by pressing the button on the MS-700.
Or you can press the button, more than likely they would, on the collective lever.
Or on the collective stick. When engaged, this mode will cancel all previously selected modes.
Okay, so it was pressed and everything cleared off at the middle markers. That was decision height.
And command the helicopter to a roll level attitude. The collective is commanded to obtain 75 knots or greater, while the pitch axis is commanded to a 700 feet per minute rate of climb. The S-76 Mark II and SPZ 7000. Sikorsky and Sperry. Digital sophistication unmatched in the industry. Couple this to electronic flight instrumentation and achieve flight path control and display capability never before realized in the helicopter marketplace. Sikorsky and Sperry, leading the way with digital technology today and beyond.
Yeah, and that system's still head and shoulders above, okay, a lot of the other systems. It's still in this day and age. Okay, guys, it's break. It's about it's about 9:23. We'll come back at about 25 to 10. So let's make our break now. For those who didn't do the attendance quiz, do the attendance quiz. I'm gonna have a look at it right now. Okay, and we're back. So if your name's up on the screen, you haven't done the attendance quiz, be sure to do the attendance quiz. And moving right along, I'm going to go to the last part of auto flight system. So the last part of auto flight system was flight management. Okay, so kind of put it in perspective, we started with basic autopilot. Basic autopilot is just sort of an idiot system that you can have a one-axis autopilot, a wing leveler, add in a second axis. In that case, it'd be your pitch. So you already had your roll, add in your pitch. That'd be a two-axis autopilot. And last but not least, three-axis autopilot includes rudder control, okay, yaw axis. That's just an autopilot, okay, something that can keep the aircraft stabilized about either 1, 2, or 3 axis, okay. As soon as you start adding in a flight director and coupling in navigational signals and air data, you just became Autopilot Plus, okay? You became an automatic flight control system. That means the aircraft can now basically fly using steering commands from different navigational sources, including GPS, including VOR, capturing the ILS, but the pilot still has to initiate the modes, press the buttons, okay? We want to go one level higher. We want to have a flight management system to do that for us. As long as we pre-program the flight management system before we go or as we go, it'll decide, when we need to switch modes, and it'll do the mode changeovers for us. So the flight management system is going to be another computer-based system tied into the flight controls and capable of automatic flight control. So the flight management system can manage the flight. Performance management, not only can it control the flight, but it can do that in a very economical fashion. It incorporates navigation and guidance, and last but not least, it provides operational status and warning display, so it has enunciation. Okay, so we're now including things like auto throttle, okay, into the system. Get into that a bit more. Okay, so we definitely have some heavy duty computing going on for the flight management system and a CDU, a display unit. So the flight management system, in essence, works in conjunction with the basic autopilot system and its flight director system. And like I said, it includes some additional computing for both the autopilot and now auto throttle. What else can it do? Well, it can do lots. It's quite sophisticated. It can store routes, flight profiles, provide information from your employer, basically from the base, and all for efficient aircraft operation and fuel consumption. Okay, so the interface, and it's an older interface. I want to click on this YouTube link here. See if we can go to that. There's only a portion of this I actually like. So not this part. Let me just pause here and make sure that you guys have audio as far as this goes. Okay, good. Okay.
The basic FMS components include the inertial reference system, the autopilot flight director system.
So you guys picking up that audio at your end?
Yeah, we can hear that.
Okay, good. Okay, that's good.
The auto throttle system, 2 CDUs.
What's a CDU? Central Display Unit. Okay.
And 2 FMCs.
Flight management computers.
FMS related instruments include the EPR indicators, box air speed indicators, and the HSI. Additional indications are provided by the ADI, which display FMS mode enunciation. And finally, there is an FMC message light located on the flight instrument panel. On the ground, the FMCs use IRS information to compute an inertial position, which is also present position.
IRU is inertial reference units.
When airborne, the FMCs will tune 2 DME stations to obtain a radio position. The FMCs will average the radio and the IRS positions to produce the FMC position, which is considered the aircraft's present position. The FMC automatically tunes to DME stations for position updating. These stations may be associated with either VOR or a localizer. Therefore, all ILS frequencies used for landing must be manually tuned. For the remainder of the lesson, you will be working with an on-screen CDU trainer.
Okay, that's enough of that one for now. So I won't go through some of these screens, but there's a lot involved in the flight management system. I will play this one here because you'll notice that last one was a little bit older. It didn't include GPS. We want GPS now fed into the flight management system for sure.
At Shop Here, we know you love what you do. You're focused on perfecting pet.
Make sure you get your audio. Okay, we're good.
Portraits. Or
This lesson is an introduction to the operation of the Smiths Industries flight management system on the Boeing 737-800 aircraft. The flight management system is comprised of these components. The aircraft can be equipped with 1 or 2 flight management computers, now with a dual FMC installation on the aircraft. You may operate using the FMS as the sole navigation source with a single FMC installation. The crew must verify all navigation data using alternate means, such as VORADFILS and marker beacons. The Control Display Unit or CDU is used to communicate with the Flight Management Computer, or FMC, on a single FMC aircraft. The CDUs are used to communicate with the single FMC.
Okay, so we want 2 flight management computers. So we want a second level of redundancy. That's going to be much better.
On a dual FMC installation, both CDUs are used to communicate with the selected FMC, which automatically updates the other FMC. When normal is selected, the left FMC is controlling both CDUs. The FMS receives position information from the inertial reference system and can also determine aircraft position by automatic tuning of the navigation radios. On a new generation aircraft, the FMS also receives position information from the GPS for accuracy.
So we want that. Okay, the newer generations incorporate GPS.
GPS information is preferred, followed by navigation radio tuning, and last by IRS. LNAV guidance is displayed on the PFD man bars. And on the ND. The ND must be selected to the full expanded nav map, or center map mode to view the LNAV guidance. Map is the preferred mode. VNAV guidance can be displayed on the ND and PFD command bars. The vertical path deviation functions somewhat like a raw data glide slope deviation display. When the route has loaded, displayed text information and guidance is available on the CDU. The flight management system computes and provides guidance for both vertical and lateral control of the aircraft throughout the flight. The guidance is provided on the flight director and the ND, and they are coupled to the autopilot for full automatic operation. In addition, the FMS provides auto throttle operation, which provides thrust and airspeed control. The FMS is loaded with a navigation database and a performance database. The navigation database includes most of the waypoints in the world and can be considered a computerized Jeppesen. You must have current navigation charts on board the aircraft to confirm FMS data. Always consult your company operation manual. Selection of the LNAV mode on the MCP will provide navigation guidance on the flight.
An MCP, just so you know, that's the master control panel, the autopilot system in a fixed wing aircraft. And the ND they keep talking about is your EFIS displays.
Flight directors and or autopilot LNAV provides full automated lateral navigation from after takeoff along the route and through the approach if desired. The performance database includes information required to efficiently climb, cruise, and descend. Selection of VNAV on the MCP will provide vertical guidance on the flight directors and autopilot or the autopilot alone. With the auto throttles armed, the FMS provides full automated vertical flight.
Hi, this is President Obama. This concludes the introduction. Do not forget to like and subscribe. And
There you go. President Obama even likes this. What do you think? Cool. Okay. So I like that one because they added in the GPS. I find this one is actually probably more of something we can relate to, this fella here.
Whether you're a student pilot planning on one-day trans.
So yeah, I want to make sure you guys have audio. I don't know if you have the audio or not. Let's see here.
Whether you're a student pilot planning on one-day transitioning to the airlines, a flight instructor, or just a commercial pilot who flies a smaller aircraft, you might never have used an FMS unit before in a jet. And it's something that's completely new when you show up for your first few days at a regional airline. So that's what I'll focus on in this video, is showing you how the FMS works, some of the features that we use to conduct our flights every single day. Now keep in mind, our FMS unit is a little bit different than some of the units you'll find in other airplanes, so I'll give you a broad overview of how it works and some of the principles that apply across the board, regardless of which airplane you'll be flying. One of the first things that we do when we get into the airplane is go ahead and power on the avionics, turn on both of our FMSs, and check the navigation database to make sure that it hasn't expired, and check that the FMS is registering a correct date and time. During pre-flight, while configuring the FMS, I'll go ahead and enter our departure airport, our flight number, and our arrival airport. You can sort of think of this as linking our FMS units to our system's operational control center at the airline so that data about our specific flight can be transferred back and forth. Before we can push back from the gate, a few things have to happen. I'll go ahead and send for the weather reports from both our departure and arrival airports as a quick reference for runway selection and any passenger announcements. I also need to send our final fuel load to dispatch and the station. The air traffic controlled cleared route is entered into the FMS and then cross-filled onto the other pilot's side. And then we'll go ahead and check our waypoints against our EFBs to make sure all of the waypoints and our route looks good. Before the door closes, we have to go ahead and print out our weight and balance closeout and our TPS report, which is used for runway performance and data. And if I need to change our departure runway after the door has closed, I can go ahead and send a message through ACARS requesting a new TPS for a different runway. In this case, I'll send a message requesting a TPS for runway 9 right with anti-ice on.
Runway 4054, flatter on my heading, runway 4 left clear for takeoff, remain at 3 of these. Runway 96, takeoff, 4 left, 3
Usually around 10 minutes after departure, a fuel progress report is sent through ACARS to our FMS. We use the fuel prog to check our fuel load against fuel checkpoints and waypoints along our route to see if we're ahead or behind on fuel, and we also use it to see if we're ahead or behind schedule with our general flight time. En route, there's a lot that we can do with our FMS. Anything from sending questions to our dispatcher to checking the weather at our arrival airport or alternate airports to get a general sense of conditions on the ground and how the trend is looking for weather conditions. Of course, there's also a full navigation database so we can see how far we are from our waypoints. To do fuel planning, it also has the ability to go ahead and calculate fuel for you to see if you're going to be ahead or behind schedule when you land. There's a ton of features inside the FMS that are really helpful en route. Let's say we're flying a STAR arrival procedure into a busy airport like Chicago. I can go to our flight plan page and enter the required crossing altitudes for each fix along the STAR, and then I'll go to the VNAV page or vertical navigation page, which gives advisory vertical guidance that gives a required descent rate to meet each of those crossing restrictions. Now keep in mind on the Embraer 145 we don't have auto throttles, so we have to control the descent manually. I'll match my vertical speed with the required descent rate given by the vertical navigation page to meet each of those crossing restrictions. That's a good overview of what I use the FMS for every day I fly. And keep in mind, when you're flying with experienced pilots, ask them how they use the FMS, because even after a year of flying on this airplane, I'm still learning tips and tricks about all of the features that we have on board.
So the only bummer on that one is the ending there. They didn't have auto throttle capability, but that's fine. Okay. So we went through this in class, the autopilot system maintenance. I had you highlight sort of the important parts about how to do a functional test on the autopilot system. We'd seen this before, categories of instrument landings, starting with category 1, which is basically operation down to a minimum of 200 feet decision height, so that's 200 feet above the ground, so that's at the middle marker, and a runway visual range of 800 meters in front. And I like the last little bit of this, with a high probability of approach success. That's great news. If you're approved for a category 2 landing, that would be operation down to a minimum of below 200 feet decision height and a runway visual range of 800 meters, so below that, to as low as 100 feet decision height and a runway visual range of 400 meters in front. Again, with a high probability of approach success. So good news. Category 3A, if you're approved for that, that's getting a little scarier. Operation down to and along the surface of the runway with external visual references during the final phase of the landing, down to a runway visual range minimum of about 200 meters in front. Category 3B is operation to and along the surface of the runway and taxiways with visibility sufficient only for visual taxiing. comparable to a runway visual range value in the order of about 50 meters in front. Whereas category 3C, which is completely blind, is operation to and along the surface of the runway and taxiways without any external or visual references. Okay, so so that's why we want, if we're approved for these categories of landing, land 2 or land 3, we want a level of redundancy. We definitely want 2, if not 3, of everything. So it says the profile in this picture, the profile of an automatic approach, flare, and landing sequence is illustrated in figure 11.2 and is based on a system that utilizes triple digital flight control computing channels, allowing for redundancy to operate in failed operation and failed passive conditions already predefined. Okay, so let's just look here. This is a category, or at least this one is a category 3B landing. I'm gonna pause that for a second, make sure my audio is good.
Above 100. 50, 40, 30, minimum 10. Retard, retard, retard. Well, we do.
A little freaky, a little scary there until the last little bit. So have a look at this one here. Let's make sure my audio is playing. There you go.
First date since your divorce.
Red sunset. 2,500. Get on. Flaps 2. Gears down, pressure checked. Flaps 2 set. Flaps 3. Flaps reset.
Flaps full. Supposed to be sound landing, let's go.
Yep. Flaps full.
642 November, 330 degrees 5 knots, runway 29, clear to land. RVR 700 meters, 600 meters, and 700 meters.
Runway 29, clear land, Austrian 642 November.
November check, flaps full, lifts used. Final check, please.
FCC, final check completed.
Ja, der Tailwind, den habe ich jetzt nicht. So stark eingeschätzt. 1000 above ground established.
Feet and last coast checked.
Land cat 3 dual.
300. 200.
Approach lights.
Check.
$100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Retard. Retard. Retard.
Spoilers extended reverse green.
Autopilot comes off.
70.
Braking.
November, contact ground on 121.775. Schönen guten Morgen.
12175, winch mile, Austrian 6 November.
So, a little intense, eh? For that one. This one probably is the most intense, this last one here. Just this one up. Okay. You guys still out there? Getting the audio all right?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. My favorite.
LAX, 117 Heavy requesting emergency approach. AM 117, come about to 175 and proceed to 3,000 feet. Roger that, LAX. We're not going to be able to make that approach. We're having trouble maintaining altitude.
Shaping up to be a rough commute out there today. Watch for an accident on the 101 near Sherman Way. And we're just getting word that the 405 southbound has been shut down completely. Looks like some sort of police activity's got it cleared for a 2-mile stretch from the 118 all the way up to Victory. As soon as we get more information, we'll let you know. But in the meantime, we'll get you through with another 40 minutes of your favorite hits on KTTV.
there you have it. There you have it. Now that was intense. I didn't know a Jeep could hold that aircraft up. Okay. So, see where we're at here. For this week, oh, no, we got to do one thing. We got to take up the autopilot stuff. So let's have a look here. Autopilot. Okay, so for the autopilot worksheet, question 1, the purpose of the autopilot system is to reduce the pilot's workload, strain, and fatigue of controlling the aircraft during long flights. Question 2, a one-axis autopilot is called a wing leveler. It's used to stabilize the aircraft about the longitudinal axis or the roll axis. Question 3, the ailerons are the primary flight control surface being controlled by a one-axis autopilot. The system is used to keep the aircraft stabilized in the roll attitude. Question 4, a two-axis autopilot system is used to stabilize the aircraft about both the longitudinal, which is the roll axis, and now the lateral axis. Question 5, the ailerons and the elevators are the primary flight control surfaces being controlled by a two-axis autopilot system. This system is used to keep the aircraft stabilized in both the roll and the pitch attitude. Question 6, the three-axis autopilot system is used to stabilize the aircraft about the longitudinal, the lateral, and the vertical axis. Question 7, the ailerons, elevators, and now rudder are the primary flight control surfaces being controlled by the three-axis autopilot system. The system is used to help the aircraft, keep the aircraft stabilized in pitch, roll, and yaw attitude. Question 8, many swept wing aircraft suffer from a dynamic instability problem known as Dutch roll. Question 9, the complex oscillation associated with Dutch roll can be stabilized by enabling the autopilot's yaw channel or by incorporating a yaw damping system into the aircraft. Question 10, an autopilot system can be divided into 4 areas. These are input, output, processing, and control. Question 11, an AFCS stands for an automatic flight control system. It's actually an autopilot plus. Question 12, an automatic flight control system is basically an autopilot system with the addition of a flight director system and an air data computer. Question 13, all autopilots or automatic flight control systems have a flight control panel that contains controls used to activate the various operating modes. This command information is sent to the autopilot computer for processing. Question 14, autopilot modes are divided into lateral modes and vertical modes. 15, a typical autopilot receives inputs from gyros such as the directional gyro to provide compass information, as well as the vertical gyro to provide both pitch and roll information, and the rake gyro to provide turn and displacement information. 16, signal sensing from gyro units can be derived by using contact points or a changing resistance from a potentiometer mechanism. These two methods work well, but may introduce some friction into the gyro, causing unwanted precession. 17, a more popular gyro sensing system involves using a fixed E-shaped piece of laminated steel in conjunction with a movable steel armature. This sensor mechanism is called an EI pickoff and requires no surface-to-surface contact. So it's a proximity sensing device. Question 18, gyro signals are sent to the autopilot computer for processing. Control signals will then be generated and amplified to produce or to provide corrective signals used to drive the servos in a fixed wing aircraft or the actuators in a rotary wing aircraft in order to move the flight control surfaces. Question 19, when the autopilot system moves a primary or secondary flight control surface, it must generate a feedback or a follow-up signal that is equal in magnitude to the original drive signal command. Question 20, this signal is used to stop, first and foremost, stop the flight control surface movement at the established displacement, and then to return the flight control surface back to its neutral position once the aircraft has arrived back on track. At that time, all signals will have canceled and the channel is said to be nulled. 21, A rotary wing autopilot system typically has two basic modes of operation. For assisting with hands-on flying, SAS, which is Stability Augmentation System mode, is provided. For complete hands-off flying, ATT mode, which is Attitude Retention mode, is available. Question 22, an optional flight director mode can be included to provide auto throttle operation with various navigation and air data systems. 23, FMS stands for Flight Management System. And 24, FMS is capable of the following: automatic flight control, performance management, navigation and guidance, operation of status and warning displays. 25, FMS works in conjunction with both the autopilot system and the flight director system, and may also be interfaced to an auto throttle system computers for auto land capability. FMS can store routes, flight profiles, and provide control information for more efficient aircraft operation and fuel consumption. So I'll be sure to put that in the autopilot module, because sometime today, I'm going to put out the last quiz, and it's going to be on ground proximity warning systems and autopilot, including FMS. Okay, and for this week's lab class, write this down. You need to bring some highlighters. So they don't have to have a bunch of them, maybe a yellow highlighter or an orange highlighter, that's fine. You need your multimeters again, and pencil crayons. If you got colored pencil crayons, bring them, and a ruler. And that is that. So unless there's any questions, what we covered, that's a wrap, you guys. And I'll see section 4 at 12:30.
See you then, Darren.
Okay, take care, Jane.
How many different color pencil crayons do we need, Darren?
Well, if you got the more the merrier. Let's put it that way.
Okay.